Hello, Dr. Jim Palermo coming to you again with a video introduction of week 8 of MELS 603, roughly speaking October 19th through the 26th, loading this a little early and going to be extending some of the discussions to try to accommodate some folks too. But it is week 8. We're about halfway through the semester. I'm pleased to be reading your discussions and the skips that have been loaded for me to read in Blackboard. That is the Stakeholder Community Involvement Plan, SCIP, Parts C, D, and E. If you have loaded those, if you haven't already, and there are one or two outstanding, please do that. They are past due now. And if you have loaded the skip CDE, and I have asked you to do some more work on that. Please resubmit. You have 2 attempts in Blackboard, and I will replace the first attempt with a second. If it was a 3, if I scored it a 3, you should be revising if you choose, but sending on to TaskStream. If it's at least proficient, then I'd like you to submit those to request comments in TaskStream. I see that some of you have already done that. I'm happy to see that. I typically have 1 or 2 days a week where I try to clean out my TaskStream, and I will be reading those beginning of the week. The big ideas for week 8 are, well, one of them is covered here in detail in the discussion. But again, we're toggling between school law and resources, and the big ideas for this week involve student disabilities in the law, and well, the other discussion for the week is on RIF, reduction in force. So it is funding in a way, but it's slightly out of sync with some of our readings. The readings are here, and I want you to focus on the student disabilities this week, because I think it lines up with the OMA C pretty well, which you should be working on as well. So 2 discussions coming up this week, students with disabilities. I would like you to focus on your OMA C for this. If you are working on the OMA, if you've already done this, great. I hope I'm not asking you to do something you haven't already done. But my suggestion for completion of the OMA, Organizational Management Analysis, Part C, Assessing Services for Special POPs, is to interview the person at your school who's in charge of special education. Elementary, middle, high school, we all organize differently. I hope, or this may be one designated teacher at your school. Certainly in most middle and high schools, there is a department chair for special ed, or someone who is charged at that school with making sure that head count is correct, that we've correctly identified students, and that their IEPs are in place, that they were complying with the law. IDEA, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to go to the PowerPoint in just a minute. But interviewing the special programs chair, finding out how your school services the needs for students with disabilities, and then responding to that interview in the discussion is Module C, the Students with Disabilities discussion. And for full credit, please do reflect and respond to at least one other. The other is about reduction in force, and that's again getting kind of into readings that will be coming up a week or 2 from now. But I thought it fell pretty well here. If you have staffed your school, if you have had at some point to line up the allotments and had to downsize in some way, what happens when you have an extra teacher? Well, I live and work in Wake County, so I've posted the Wake County School Board policy, but I want you to look and see what the policy is at your school, in your district. What happens if you, as the site-based budget manager, the principal at your school, have to RIF a teacher? That is called a reduction in force, RIF. If you don't know, this does happen, and different districts have different procedures or policies about who should go. Know what your district policy is, please, and then respond to this scenario. Do a little bit of digging and find out what your district policy is, and try to include that in your post as well. So that's one thing to do this week. That's in the discussions. In the MELS content for Module 8, you'll see a couple of things. The PowerPoint is where I'm going to go next, but this is here. And in the PowerPoint from the top, it is lining up with Volume 1, Chapters 7 and 21 about students with disabilities. Um, IDEA, what should you know? As a teacher, aspiring administrator for most schools, what should you know about the law and special education kids? Well, know that it is the law that serving children of all types, of all needs, is the law. And to provide them with a free, appropriate public education is the big deal. Now, as a principal, as a site-based administrator, I try to be guided first by knowing and following the law. Being in compliance will keep you out of an orange jumpsuit, and that's a good thing. The other is what's best for kids. So I hope that you bring your humanity along when you're sitting in the chair as LEA in an IEP meeting. That is, if you're the local education agency, if you're the principal or assistant principal, the designated administrator sitting in an IEP meeting, you are something called the LEA, the local education agency. You're a representative of the school district. And so much as the school district is providing the resources, the funding or the teachers or the TA for that child in order to meet his or her IEP, you carry a lot of weight sitting in those IEP meetings as LEA. So first you got to know and follow the law, but then I hope that you also bring your heart and your head to that meeting and try to think about what's best for kids. Um, when I sat in these meetings, I often tried to think about the child that was the focus for the IEP as if he were my own. I do have two grown sons, and so this isn't so far fetched for me. What would I want or what would I do if this were my child? So bring your heart and head along with your legal status. Kids are evaluated, know what the policies and procedures are for your grade level, elementary, middle, or high school for evaluation and for reevaluation. Know what the law is, and that parents have to consent, of course. IEPs, know what the law is and follow the law. And if you don't know, starting by interviewing your department chair at your school is a great way to find that out. And this is the stuff that you're going to then report in your OMA. What are the services at your school for kids with special education needs? How are they aligned with the resources that you have at your school? How's the school meeting those children's needs? RTI is rolled out in a variety of different ways at different districts. You may not even have heard of something called RTI, but an assessment process that's ongoing that does not immediately jump kids from not being successful in classrooms to special education placement, but trying a number of steps along the way in order to try to meet that child's needs before a special ed placement may be the best way to provide that free and appropriate public education. Assistive technology, again, when you're signing off as LEA, do you say that the child has a one-on-one laptop? Do you say that he or she should be provided with other assistive technology? You have to then follow through with whatever the recommendations are from the IEP, and please try not to agree to something that you can't deliver. Program review, they're ongoing. Make sure that you have read over the PowerPoint and follow it. One of the big ideas of the IDEA is the least restrictive environment. Um, Again, what's best for kids? Well, years ago, educators thought in their best intentions, that separating children and putting them into separate settings was the best way to accommodate all special ed kids. And we know that there are some severely handicapped children, physically or mentally handicapped children, that do need separate settings, that do need a separate pull-out classroom for some or all of their services. But that's not necessarily true of all kids. And the more that you can include kids and mainstream them to the greatest degree appropriate and possible, then that's what's best for kids. Residential facilities are typically very expensive, and usually a child is very severely mentally or physically handicapped before the district will provide those kinds of services. When it gets to this level, if this type of scenario has presented itself at your school and you're unsure of how to act, please pick up the telephone and call your central office resource folks for help on these residential placements. We may not isolate or restrain children with disabilities. You hear horror stories about tape over mouths or lock up rooms. No. Again, use your heart and your head and do what's best for kids. And isolating or restraining kids should be a last resort to protect themselves or the safety of others. Same is true of disciplining students with disabilities. Ask your special ed chair or the person at your school in charge what happens if a student with a disability, LD to TMH, is charged with some violation of the school board policy that would result in a suspension. We have to do different things with kids with IEPs. If you don't know that, find out what the law is. And a long-term suspension for a child with a disability is going to be pretty difficult. Here are some select court cases for you to check out. But again, I think that interviewing the folks at your school, finding out how services are provided for children at your school will help you complete the OMAC, but also help you to know and follow the law when it comes time for you to serve as the LEA. I believe that about covers it for this week. I want you to read and do this PowerPoint. I want you to check into the OMAC if you've not already written that, and interview someone at your school to find out what services are there, respond to the discussions, and continue to load SCIPS and OMA in Blackboard and in TaskStream for me to read. Thank you. See you next week.